obviously in terms of what we're thinking about in the future is taking care of that entire process of, we're going to help you generate leads. We're going to help you manage those leads and manage kind of your CRM there. Then obviously if you use Crema, you'll get paid and it's going to be much faster and smoother than anything. And then once you have that history, we'll start giving you access to financing products, right? And everything becomes very seamless. Everything becomes part of the way that you work as a freelancer. And that's kind of the way that we're looking at it, making sure that you can do what you would do best, your craft, and then we'll do everything else for you. That is what we want to do. And that's kind of what we want to make sure that all freelancers understand about our platform. Because at the end of the day, you don't become a freelancer because you love doing taxes, right? You don't really do that. You don't want to do prospecting. You really don't want to do kind of your CRM and boring stuff. You just want to design. You just want to do development or whatever, right? And we want to allow you to do just that so you can keep perfecting your craft. And that's kind of the end goal here.
Hey, everyone. Welcome back to the Ignite podcast. Today, we're delighted to have Christian Jacobsen on the program. He's the founder CEO of Crema. Thanks for coming on, Christian.
No, thanks so much for having me, Brian. Super excited to be here and chat with you today.
Yeah, me too. I would love to get an intro from you for the audience.
Yeah, sure. So Christian, co-founder of Crema. Crema is a all-in-one software for freelancers to help them with payments, collections, and access financial products. So that's more or less what we do. Obviously, before I've had some experience starting other startups, 2 of them actually, and being a freelancer as well. So that's kind of why, or what led me to start Crema in the first place. But yeah, that's more or less kind of a very short version of me.
You originally went to University of SF. Tell me what that was like, and what was that decision-making process?
Yeah. So originally I'm from Norway, and kind of early on, I knew that I didn't want to kind of stay too long in Norway, especially for my education. And so I was looking at different options in terms of where I wanted to study and do my kind of undergraduate degree. And San Francisco obviously was one option that I was gravitating towards. And, University of San Francisco was one that I was kind of looking at, was interesting, middle of the city of San Francisco as well. So I had a lot of good opportunities to kind of stay in the middle of the city for a university, which is not very common. So kind of went to choose that type of education. Obviously not the huge school, not that famous either.
Right.
But also have a lot of good kind of professors in terms of entrepreneurship, right? Which is one thing I definitely knew that I wanted to do. And so obviously that was very much part of kind of making that decision of going to University of San Francisco. And obviously being there, it was kind of this aha moment in terms of like, okay, things are very, very much possible, right? A lot of the professors that we had were entrepreneurs or had been entrepreneurs for a long time. And I think one professor in particular was like, I would say the catalyst, and there's like, okay, I can start something right now. And he always had these types of stories, of things he'd been up to between classes, right? So we had class with him every week, and every single week he came into the class and he was like, guys, I came back from Peru and we met this indigenous tribe, and what we're doing right now is basically creating shoes out of, different types of trees that are only indigenous in Peru, helping like kind of those types of tribes. And like, we're going to help them like raise their economic mobility. We're going to do all these things for these communities, and we're going to sell these shoes in the US, and it's all going to be awesome. Right. And so he had always these types of interesting stories. And it was like, you always went into that class like, wow, I want to be this guy. Right. And obviously he was very much kind of the reason why we went on to start the kind of the first company that we had, which was a CRM tool for SMBs. And he obviously was part of kind of investing. He also had some friends that helped with kind of getting that initial funding round together. It was a small angel round. And that's kind of why we decided to go into that path, right? And obviously I think without him as kind of that mentor, most likely I wouldn't have started, a startup right out of school, and maybe even not starting a startup at all. Who knows? So that was kind of the for me at least, like University of San Francisco was very, very integral into kind of the path that I'm following right now, at least.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. Yeah, sometimes it's like a really great instructor, professor, teacher who kind of
definitely
pulls you into their center of gravity and slingshots you into a different direction. For me, it was history in high school. I had like a couple really excellent history teachers, and it's like, I want to be like these guys. I love, talking about history and kind of and thinking about how humans developed over centuries and millennia, and it's just the most fascinating subject. And I'm still pretty into history, not as much as I used to be, but I started as a history major because of that. And probably in a different universe, I'm teaching high school history right now, or college level history. It got really boring in my third year. I was like reading letters between people, and that's actually turns out it's really boring. And so tell me about this first startup. That this came right out of UCSF or what?
Yeah,
or USF.
Yeah. So straight out of USF, obviously had this idea of Salesforce, and Salesforce was like this huge company, and today obviously is even bigger. But it was kind of this complicated tools to use for businesses, right? Obviously, if you're a smaller business, you really don't need everything that you get from Salesforce, right? And a lot of times you really don't have all those processes in place where it becomes such a huge tool for you, which is much more towards like enterprise sales and stuff like that. And so we saw that there was kind of this big opportunity to help all these SMBs, these smaller businesses, in terms of like, how do you actually run your CRM, or not even pay that much for it, right? So that was kind of the initial spark of why we decided to do that. Obviously, did a lot of market research in terms of going out and interviewing all these people who had their own businesses, family businesses a lot of times. And a lot of them didn't even use CRMs, right? A lot of them were like, no, we're just doing this through Excel, or we're doing this, or just taking clients as they come and go.
Whatever.
Yeah, it's just taking clients as they come and go. And so it made a lot of sense for us at the time to kind of build out the CRM. Looking back at it, it's very naive for people coming out of college, haven't really had a job in the first place, no real experience in terms of CRMs to begin with. And so kind of very naive to start that. I think a lot of times also if you start a company, that naivete can kind of help you a lot, because you don't really have those perceived blockers of like, no, this is not going to work because of this, and that. And so I think that usually can be a helper, but it also can be a blocker. Like we had no idea how to, build out any software. We're obviously just a couple of undergrads wanting to do some business, and it obviously ended up failing, so flopping. But obviously learned a lot in terms of like, what are things that you should do when you're starting a company, right? You should not build out this huge software without having any type of clients, any type of revenue, and then kind of try to sell it, right? You should always have
if you build it, they will come. Field of Dreams startup strategy.
Exactly. Yeah. So obviously we fell straight into that fall, and we should obviously in retrospect have built out a couple elements, tested it with clients, try to sell, and then kind of build it with our clients. And we kind of went the opposite direction. Like we know best. We're gonna build this thing, and then they're just gonna come, right?
Yeah.
So
that's a classic story on first startups and first product roles, right? Like I spent years trying to get my own startups off the ground, but also in-house as a PM, building a bunch of stuff and having this grand vision I sold internally, and then spending a bunch of engineering resources, not even startup resources. These are like real, corporate resources, 10 people for 6 months, building something, which is very expensive. Stop and think about it. That's, I probably spent like $1 million or $2 million of some shareholders' money, right? More or less. Someone's money.
Yeah.
And had nothing to show for it, built it. And it turns out you have to, iterate with your customers, right? Really listen to what they need, and MVPs are a real thing. I have here in my notes, work with Veta and the concept of fake founders. What is that?
Yeah. So obviously when I finished the startup, or the startup failed, it was very difficult to stay in San Francisco without any money. So me and my now wife decided let's go to Mexico. Let's see how that's like. Obviously she's Mexican, so it was like an easy transition.
Yeah.
So I came in, and obviously into the entrepreneurial ecosystem in Mexico through first a venture build that was focused much more on fintechs. And so I was part of kind of the ideation of several fintechs that we had there. Some of them are pretty big today. Klar is one, like a neobank. That's one of the bigger ones.
Oh yeah, in Mexico. I'm an investor in Jar. Yeah.
In Klar, sorry, Jar Klar.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
And yeah, so obviously was part of kind of the ideation stage there, and then went on to another kind of venture builder and they had this concept of building startups, but for corporations, right? So helping corporations innovate, like a lot of things that you mentioned right now. Like instead of you internally doing it, we would take some resources from the company, very separate, build the startup, use kind of the advantages and distribution models that the businesses had, and then kind of build on top of that to create a startup that really kind of had a flying start. So that was kind of the idea there. And obviously we had these fake founders, like we called them, which were basically like the founders of these companies, but obviously with the idea of they're going to create this from 0 to 1 and then leave it off to kind of the
Call that
the
a founder in residence.
Yeah,
it's
also the same thing.
Saying it.
It's a founder in residence, basically, but they kind of went with a fake founder.
Yeah, fake founder
name. So obviously all of them had like different types of skills. You had like the business focused one or the design focused one, technology focused one. So obviously the three elements that you generally see in kind of a founding team that has most kind of success. So being able to develop product and kind of sell it. And so that was kind of the concept there. Obviously my role was to obviously give them a lot of advice in terms of like different things that you can do in terms of making this thing successful. And after that went on to kind of build a company that's called Okieboy. That was kind of, you could say, a kind of bigger success for us there.
Yeah. So tell us about kind of from working on the Veta to that sounds like another startup, and then eventual founding of Crema.
Yeah. So obviously inside of Veta, I got to know a corporation that was inside the gas industry in Mexico, so propane gas delivery. And they were kind of interested in creating a startup, something focused much more on, how do you grow their business in terms of making sure that all the things have, or things the delivery trucks have technology. And so building IoT devices more than anything. And so obviously got to know them a lot, got to know the industry. And on my own and with my other co-founder, we saw there was a huge opportunity in terms of like giving a lot of visibility to the end user in kind of this industry, right? Because at the end of the day, in Mexico at least, and you ask for propane gas is very much integral to the home. So you needed to cook, you needed to heat up water, you needed to a lot of different elements. But the process of actually acquiring that propane gas is very, very manual and hasn't really been innovated in the last 50 years, right? You would call up your gas guy. He would say, hey, I'll be there in 30 minutes or an hour. You would wait in your home. You didn't really know where he was. They would show up 8 hours later. They would charge you whatever they felt like. They would fill up your tank half full. And so you had all these types of elements for the end user that really was like a really shitty experience. And we saw there was very, very low barrier to entry in terms of like acquiring these users, but also giving them a good experience, but also giving that other side of the marketplace, more clients, being able to kind of predict demand for them so that it can, get more gas and get more clients at the same time. So that's kind of the initial idea of what we decided to build within Okieboy, which is what it was called. So it became kind of this Uber for gas and propane delivery in Mexico City, expanded to different cities in Mexico that had the same types of problems. And then type of expanding into kind of the offerings that we were doing. So once you kind of integrated yourself into the home of the end user, then you can start accessing different types of products, like, lawn care, and you can get access to water and stuff like that.
Right.
So that was kind of the distribution model that we wanted to have. But also on the other side of the marketplace, you have all these independent gas providers. At the end of the day, they lease kind of the brands from the big companies, set up their own shop, just smacks the brand on their car, and then goes and delivers gas, right? And so these people don't really have that much liquidity. And so all their money go into buying gas, finding where to buy it cheaper, and then kind of deliver it to their end user. So we kind of gave them also financing options so that they could actually get more gas, get more clients, and then kind of grow their business, right? So the thing that we did with Okieboy, and then ended up selling it to another big gas company in Mexico.
Oh, nice. Nice little outcome there. And then, walk us through kind of like after you sell that business, you're to the founding of Crema. What was that process like, and how long did that take, and what was the aha moment? And were you searching around and it just fell in your lap, or was it always kind of percolating in the back of your mind? Or
so obviously within kind of the first startup I started, I had to kind of make sure that we had a little bit of money and I could live off of myself as well. So I did a lot of freelancing jobs in terms of being like more than anything like an innovation consulting or innovation consultant. And then beginnings of Okieboy as well, did a little bit of freelancing just to kind of keep things afloat and have a little bit of extra cash. And one thing that I always kind of had a problem with was charging my clients. was always a hassle to get paid, once on time, and two, if they were international, just getting paid from them, which is really expensive. And it always led to clients just forgetting to pay and being like, hey, sorry, wasn't able to do it. And then they bounce back and all these types of different things. And it was so annoying. And so kind of when we sold Okieboy, I was kind of a very, very clean kind of, okay, here we go.
The operation. See you later. Yeah.
Yeah.
They didn't want to keep you around for like a year or two. They just said,
no,
yeah, we'll just take this.
Yeah, because the gas company was more than anything interested in technology, right? So we weren't very big for them, but like obviously they're doing billions of dollars in revenue. We were pretty small. We had this cool technology, and they saw they could take that to use and kind of use that for their entire operation.
Right.
So they were like, yeah, so we'll take it here. And so obviously we're very, very clean there. And then had a lot of time on my hands, started freelancing again. So that these problems were still existing. It was just like, man, there's so much you can do for all these freelancers who at the end of the day are people. They have all these needs. They're alone. At the end of the day, it's a business of one. And you have to kind of manage your whole operations, right? You not only have to do sales, you have to do your own CRM, you have to follow up with your clients, you have to get paid, you have to do all this upselling things. So you have all these different elements that you have to do as a freelancer, but you don't really have time to do it. And so we saw that the biggest kind of wedge we could have was this cross-border payments option for these freelancers, so that one, it's super easy, automized for them, but also they can start accessing different financing options based on what they're earning within the platform. So that was kind of the initial idea that me and my co-founder had in terms of what we wanted to do for those freelancers. And then obviously as time has gone by, we see that there's so many opportunities in terms of like helping these people just grow their business and operate it as smooth as possible. All they want to do at the end of the day is focus on their own craft, which could be, design, could be, software developer, whatever it is that they want to do. And then we'll kind of take care of everything between kind of the lines there where you don't really have to spend time on that, right? So that's kind of the initial idea of what Crema is and what we want to achieve for these freelancers, right?
Yeah. And, if you kind of look at your past, it's kind of like connecting all the dots, right? You had this startup where you tried to do a CRM for small businesses. You had a pretty successful marketplace company that's full of freelancers. You did some freelancing on your own, right? So you had a lot of empathy and experience in the space. Let's walk us through kind of that first 6 to 12 months of the journey, maybe kind of before your first round, before any friends and family stuff. Like, how did you get started? How did you apply some of those lessons that you took from some of your earlier things?
Yeah. So obviously the first part was to figure out like where do we start? Like with all these different issues that these freelancers have, where do we start? And obviously it was very easy for us to say, okay, let's start with payments. Okay, payments is one, the biggest pain point, and two, it's also where we can earn a lot of money, right? And it's also not that competitive in terms of platforms that are made for freelancers. Obviously you have Stripe and you have PayPal and all these different options, but they really aren't made for the way freelancers work and kind of run their business. So that there's a big opportunity here to kind of help all these people. So that's kind of what we started out doing, right? Let's create this payment platform for them, focus on cross-border more than anything, because we know that that's just so annoying and so expensive and it can be really easy to create. And so we spent time building out that project, talking with a lot of users, talking with a lot of our friends that are also freelancers, and kind of gave us kind of the initial inputs there on what should be available, which it really isn't that much of a big deal. And then, after 2 months, we had a very, very, you can call it an MVP. I'm not going to consider if it's an MVP. It's just like a link to get paid, basically, that is allowed for cross-border. And then it kind of evolved from there, like obviously with customer feedback, with different types of elements that we knew that we wanted to integrate within the platform. And then obviously it became much bigger than just payments, right? And obviously what we're building is trying to be a lot bigger than just that.
Why is cross-border so difficult? I see lots of different remittance startups, and I'll see them for very specific use cases. Like it's from Africa to the US, or it's from Nigeria to the rest of Africa, or it's from Nigeria to the EU. Like, why is it so complex?
I think you have a lot of regulation in place. Like you have different countries with different regulations. You have a lot of that in place. So that's kind of one that makes it difficult. The second one is that banks, more than anything, have had this monopoly, right, of deciding how much do I charge for foreign exchange, right? And a lot of times it's like more than 10%. And you're just okay with it as a user because how else are you going to, receive money? So it's not really, hasn't been that competitive, I think is kind of the important part of why it hasn't evolved up until very recently. And I think the niche use cases are more than anything kind of looking at the band, looking at supply and kind of where people are going to be most eager to use this platform, right? So like you said, like from US to Africa or like different corridors. And it's pretty easy to set up different corridors with different entities between countries and make sure that you're regulated in those two countries, right? But when you start adding on countries and countries, it becomes much more complex. And with that complexity comes cost as well. So there's a lot of things in place there that makes it expensive. But more than anything, I think it's just a monopoly in terms of the banks that make it much more expensive. And obviously, they're really, really incentivized to make sure that no one else enters the space. That's why, for example, in let's say Mexico as an example, creating a bank in Mexico right now is impossible. Right? There's so much.
We call that regulatory capture, right?
Yes.
When the banking institutions will lobby the government and say, "Hey, you have to protect us, otherwise it's going to be chaos and unlawfulness." Okay, we'll pass some regulations to make it really tough.
And that's what's happening. Obviously, you have in Mexico, you have hundreds of fintechs that are just applied for licenses in terms of being different types of financial entity, and you're just waiting around. I have a friend that has a neobank in Mexico, and they hired like a team of 60-person people just to lobby, just to lobby, and they're spending insane amounts of money just to lobby the government and kind of making sure they get a seat on the table. And that's kind of the reason why also it becomes so difficult to, one, create fintechs, but two, when you have these remittances as well, like making sure that you get something that really isn't that expensive for end users. And at the end of the day, you see today, cryptocurrency and stablecoins more than anything, that really is a way to bypass that, right? Because you now have this type of
you have a different rail, basically.
Different rail.
Yeah, you convert it to Bitcoin or some whatever. And then you just simultaneously convert it back to whatever other dollar in that other country, and so it bypasses that whole financial system, basically.
Yeah, you have no one with that monopoly, right? And
is that
so
how
that
you
makes
guys are solving the remittance problem for your platform?
Parts of it, yeah.
Wow. And so, are there certain countries, country to country, you just have to do the crypto thing?
Yeah.
Which ones are those? Like, which ones are really hard?
Man, there's a lot of them that are really hard. I think right now, in terms of Latin America, where we have more than anything, more volume, Bolivia is a big one. Bolivia is notoriously difficult and expensive. So you have to have that in place there. You have also different types of geographies that
is that just because the banking system there is so protectionist against the national banks there?
Very, very monopolistic, yeah. And so it becomes extremely expensive to send money in and out of Bolivia, for example.
So do you think the governments eventually step in a situation like that, where they see fintech startups like you guys going around the established channels that have the high tax toll rates of 10 or 15% to do the transfers, and now it's like, hey, we can do it for a few bucks?
Yeah.
Do you see like Bolivia or governments like that going,
Definitely.
hey, we got to pass some crypto regulation here? They're going around the national banks that we're trying to protect.
Yeah, definitely. And that's going to happen too. I think at the end of the day, it's very much in terms of power of corruption and kind of power of the people. So if enough people are using a certain solution, then it's very difficult to pass kind of a bill like that, just because you're going to upset a lot of people, right?
Well, it's kind of like regulating gold is how would be my analogy. Like, you have to make money, fiat currency in this case, so much easier to use and stable, that who would want to like go through the trouble of getting gold coins to trade? That's not that you can't do that. You can probably still just go down to the store and say, hey, I have a piece of gold, I want to buy this thing, in Bolivia or wherever else. And Bitcoin or other currencies are kind of the same thing, right? They're just a store of value that we've decided is worth this money based on the kind of the work and energy that goes into staking them or whatever.
Yeah, definitely. And then you have other use cases, for example, where you have Argentina, for example, where inflation is just really, really high. And it becomes, like you said, a store of value. I'm going to hedge myself against the local currency. because every single day I'm losing 1% of my money, right? Because if I have it in local currency. And so you have these elements too that make it very, very interesting kind of as a rail. I do think that definitely the governments are going to regulate it much more going forward. We'll just have to wait and see. It's very difficult to kind of see what's going to happen there, but definitely something, if the demand is like halfway there, which is, I think, is got the inflection point where we are right now, it's easy for the government to start regulating. They can say, hey, putting on blockers, and because the demand is not big enough.
Yeah, the ingress, egress, they'll make it hard to go on chain, off chain, basically. They'll
in Argentina,
try to tax that. Yeah.
Exactly. In Argentina, I think they crossed that, and it's really in high demand now. So it's going to be very difficult for the Argentinian government, for example, to regulate much more. But
if people won't buy your, denominated T-bills or whatever they are in Argentina, if they'd rather put their money into Bitcoin, it creates more pressure on. It becomes this like runaway inflation, right? If nobody will buy your stuff, then you have to like keep raising the rates or giving discounts, which puts further pressure on the currency. Anyway, I hope that's not where we're going for in the U.S., but we, we're going $1 trillion into debt every 3 or 4 months now. So I think it's not too far off to say like, eventually people are like, I'm going to stop buying US dollars. I'm going to put my money somewhere else.
Yeah, we'll see what happens.
So you solve this payment problem. So, I'm a freelancer in one country in Latin America somewhere, and I'm doing work for, some other company in some other country. It could be North America, Europe. What was the next problem that you saw? Like what was the next big rock that these freelancers needed?
Definitely financing options and access to credit options is kind of the big one here. And it's a very notorious problem to solve as well, because you have all these people who are not part of the financial system in the normal way. They're not on payroll. They're receiving money, but it fluctuates every single month. So it's difficult to say how much you actually make. They also have these different types of use cases, and it's a lot of people now coming into that market. And what we're seeing is obviously these people really don't have any type of access. Banks are not going to give it to them, at least for the foreseeable future. And so you have to find a way to kind of give these people the access that they need, because at the end of the day, these people are people who earn a lot of money a lot of times. They just don't get that access. And what happens when you have all these people who earn that type of money, they become desperate and they kind of say, hey, I need to buy a car. Right. I need to buy a house, like all the other friends.
I can't qualify because I don't have W-2. My 1099 or whatever the equivalent is in LATAM is all over the place. But if you look, hey, the last 3 months I made X dollars. You multiply that by 4, I'm in pretty good shape. But then the bank's looking at it, it's like, well, it's variable. Mm-hmm. You made most of that money in 1 month, and then the other 2 months you made almost nothing. So how do I know? How do I underwrite that as this traditional bank that's used to underwriting like W-2, very stable income kind of credit applicants?
Yeah, at the end of the day, it's kind of the appetite for risk that bank has. Like it's very low. You have all these other different fintechs that come in, but they have all these predatory rates. Like they really don't score you. They're just like, okay, I'll give you $1,000, but you have to give me 3,000 in return, right? It's like really difficult for you as a person to say, okay, I'll take that. You have to be really desperate to take that. And that's why kind of those solutions go much more towards like the bottom of the pyramid. But you have all these people in the middle there and towards the top that are really kind of high income earners that really need like a that type of access, but they're not willing to pay these insane interest rates for it, right? And so you see this great opportunity of all these experienced professionals who are coming into the market. You have all these newer generations who really don't have any type of income history at all. And they're all going to evolve as freelancers. They're all going to evolve as independents, and they're going to need that type of access, in the future. And so if you start using, for example, the way that we're thinking about is that you start using Crema, you start kind of showing us your history in terms of how much you earn. We can tell in terms of your clients, how often do they pay you? Do they pay you on time? What type of businesses are paying you at the end of the day? And then we can also take a look at your CRM and say, hey, you are able to get this many leads per month. You close at a close rate of X%, and probably going to be very true in the future as well. So you have all these elements that banks don't have access to. And at the end of the day, you can also integrate different types of data that you can get from open banking as well. So you have the same amount of data that banks have, but you have an additional data set that you can use to kind of score these people. And so that's kind of the way that we're thinking about how we can give these freelancers access to that type of financing. And more solutions are going to come out and kind of close that gap that we think is going to be very important. And being well positioned in a market that's so big, it's going to be, paramount. And having kind of a brand that's very freelancer friendly is also something that we thought a lot about. We're not going to be the ones that take advantage of freelancers, not in financing option, not in payments option. We're just going to give you the tools that you need to run your business. And if you love Crema, that's good. You're going to stay around. If not, and if you're always looking for kind of the cheapest option everywhere and the best option everywhere, then maybe Crema is not for you, right? But just know that we're here and we're kind of in support of freelancers. And that's kind of the way that we've decided to kind of build out this brand of a freelancer-friendly platform.
Nice. So what's your vision for where it goes in the next 5 or 10 years?
Yeah, so it's definitely integrating more financing options. It's taking care of the entire process of freelancers have from start to finish, in terms of when you look at a freelancer and types of the blockers that they have. One is, I need to get clients, right? That's a big one. 2, I need to get paid from these clients. 3, I need to run my business in a way that makes sense. And then you have, these financing options. Once I kind of have established myself as a professional in terms of independent, and I can kind of start accessing those things. So there's 4 important blockers that we're looking at. How do we solve it? Obviously, in terms of what we're thinking about in the future, is taking care of that entire process of, we're going to help you generate leads. We're going to help you manage those leads and manage kind of your CRM there. Then obviously, if you use Crema, you'll get paid, and it's going to be much faster and smoother than anything. And then once you have that history, we'll start giving you access to financing products, right? And everything becomes very seamless. Everything becomes part of the way that you work as a freelancer. And that's kind of the way that we're looking at it, making sure that you can do what you would do best, your craft, and then we'll do everything else for you. That is what we want to do. And that's kind of what we want to make sure that all freelancers understand about our platform. Because at the end of the day, you don't become a freelancer because you love doing taxes, right? Unless you're an accountant. You don't really do that. You don't want to do prospecting. You really don't want to do kind of CRM and boring stuff. You just want to design. You just want to do development or whatever, right? And we want to allow you to do just that, so you can keep perfecting your craft. And that's kind of the end goal here.
I love it. Well, let's switch to a rapid fire.
Yep, let's do that.
What is your favorite book on entrepreneurship?
I'm going to say the new Elon Musk book. I love it.
Walter Isaacson biography?
Yeah, it's a long one.
Yeah, so good.
But it's so full of things that he thinks about, and it's really awesome. Another one is...
Why do people hate Elon so much, you think?
I don't know. I think he's controversial.
I don't get it either. He's controversial. I think he takes controversial stances, but he does it on purpose to kind of, I think, shine a light back on people's assumptions and beliefs.
Definitely. Yeah,
he makes people feel uncomfortable because he's willing to say the hard things, I think, on Twitter.
Yeah, and he takes big bets. He swings for the fences, and I love it. So yeah, that's kind of the recent one that I read that I really enjoyed.
Yeah, anybody like that makes such an impact is going to gather some enemies along the way. And it's just weird to watch people squirm about him. And I'm like, I don't know. Have you founded $100 billion company and multiple $10 billion companies? Nope. So you haven't? Then shut up. Then shut up. You have no idea what you're talking about.
Definitely.
You work at a regular job, like you just collect a paycheck. That guy's out there creating like trillions and trillions of dollars of value, and you're criticizing him? Like, I don't get it. I just don't get it.
Love that guy.
Yeah, I could go on for that on that topic for about 10 more minutes. If you could give one piece of advice to your younger self, what would it be?
Swing for the fences. I think that's kind of the biggest one. When you're young, you have that opportunity. I think it becomes more and more difficult as years go by, and you start establishing yourself with kids and mortgages to pay and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Start early, swing for the fences, and don't take yourself too seriously, and don't take others too seriously. I think others, like you just mentioned, they just criticize to criticize, and they don't really like people who take risks because it's not part of their nature. But I think as
makes them feel uncomfortable. Yeah.
As you're young, you have that opportunity. I mean, I think you have that opportunity always, but it's easier, at least when you're younger. So I think that's kind of the biggest one. And also, I probably wouldn't, or I'm gonna tell my sons, don't go to college, start your business, learn that way if that's what you want to do, unless you really want to become like scientific genius and kind of
Yeah, if you
cancer.
really want to be a mechanical engineer,
Yeah.
or a civil engineer and work on bridges, I mean, by all means do that. But like, you have two kinds of people in the world, right? Well, maybe three. There's people who discover new things. That's scientists, right? You have people that build things. Those are like engineers and, the various kind of builders in our society. And then you have people who sell things.
Yep.
Right. And so figure out what kind of person you are and then just try to lean into that strength,
Yep.
Are you more on the sales end, which could be an entrepreneur as well? Because like as a founder, you're selling constantly.
Yep.
As a managing partner of my own venture firm, that's all I'm doing all the time is selling.
Yeah.
And selling to engineers, builder types that are building value, right? And they're applying stuff that the scientists discovered. And so you kind of figure out where you fit in and what you're good at. And I've talked a lot about this on this podcast and on my Substack, which is, like, what would you do if you had like 100 million in the bank? I think that's the most important thing, because usually if you ask somebody that, it's not what they're working on. And that's a problem, right? If 90% of people plus will say, hey, that's not what I'm doing. Okay, great. Well, how do you take steps towards doing the thing? I love that.
Yep.
Definitely. What's the most innovative business model you've encountered either recently or just ever?
There's a lot. I think I'm really into the AI wearables at the moment. I think that can be very, very interesting. I think Limitless. I'm not sure you're that model, but it's kind of the necklace that you have, and it basically records everything for you, so you don't have to remember, right? So it remembers everything for you.
That's so cool.
And very, very interesting kind of seeing that applied to your life, like the conversation that we have, right? It's just going to remember everything. You just ask about it and it's going to tell you.
You don't have to sit down and actually sit in front of a camera and record a podcast to remember it.
Yep.
It's recording your life all the time.
Exactly.
That's really fascinating.
Brings a lot of issues, obviously. I read that there's a lot of legal issues, like everything is discoverable in terms of if you do something illegal. Hopefully you won't. But definitely very much in line to kind of what I think the future is going to be like. I think we've also talked about this before. I think like the Optimus robot from Tesla looks like it's going to be definitely part of our lives in 5 to 10 years time.
Could be years, single digit years. I mean, that's going to radically change our economy, is when you have the supply of labor asymptote to zero.
Exactly.
Economically, just the whole world looks different.
Yeah. And like it's kind of very much aligned to kind of what we want the future to look like as well, like in terms of freelancers. Like you do what you love to do, and then someone else handles everything else. And I think those types of robots are going to allow that. Like you don't want to do laundry, like you don't want to wash dishes. This robot's going to do it for you, and then you can do whatever you feel like.
Yeah, you get another hour.
Liberate.
Yeah,
you're
hour
get so
per day
much
to
time
do stuff.
Back. Yeah. And how you use that time is obviously up to you, but it's going to at least give you that option, right? You have more time.
And not only that, but you have like AI assistants who can coach you and tutor you on any topic that you want to get better at. So like for me, one of my bucket list items, and this is kind of funny, but I'll also say it on the podcast anyway, is to make like hip hop beats. I grew up listening to hip hop and rap. And I always thought it'd be really cool to be able to make those beats, but I've never sat down and actually done it. But if I had more time on my hands, I had more AI assistants helping me run my venture fund, maybe I'd have an extra hour or two a day, to do that. And I could see like a future where there's a lot of creativity unlocked in humanity when robotics kind of gets, embedded across the economic table, as it were. I think you free up a lot of creativity for humans to go, I would like to kind of work on that thing. I'm really interested in that. And, and you'll have the freedom, time, and resources. It'd be like me sharing a PDF doc with you.
Yeah.
Like, why would I care about sharing a PDF doc with you? Of course, I'll share my AI assistant with you. Of course, that'll be embedded and everybody will have access to ChatGPT 7.0 or whatever. And it'll be super intelligent and able to help you on anything. You want to, start a company here? Like you have like the best entrepreneurial professor, like, that, like the one that made an impact on you, back in college. Everybody will have access to that level of professor talent that can help coach you on anything. Definitely. It's just amazing. Yeah, it's a really exciting time to be alive. The next question's funny based on how like techno optimist that all that conversation just was, but how do you stay motivated during challenging times?
Yeah, it's a good question. I like to kind of think a little bit about the future like we're doing right now. It could be kind of with in lines of Crema and what we do, but also like different things that would be cool if they existed. So I kind of go into that default mode of create and ideate, just because of my background and things that I've been involved with. Like, it's part of my nature now, and I kind of love doing that. Doesn't necessarily mean that I want to kind of see things through like that. Just like to think about what can be, what will be, and kind of make sure that motivates me in terms of like looking at Crema and what we're building, if it's the right thing to build, if it's kind of the future that we want. And so that's kind of the fallback that I always have in terms of like, if something doesn't work out within the company, if there's errors or this issue, then kind of looking at how you can solve it, but also looking at why we're solving it in the first place. Like, there's a reason why we're solving, there's a reason why we're building Crema. And kind of always going back to that is kind of the default mode of how I like to take on, you could call it, challenging times there.
Yeah, love that. What's your go-to productivity tool or app?
I use Notion a lot. I think Notion has gotten worse, I think.
Oh, interesting.
But I do use Notion for a lot of things. Huh. For note-taking, CRM. I use it for basically everything.
I've seen it, I invest in startups, so I see it a lot. And I just haven't got it. Like, I do use Airtable. Airtable for my deal flow list and what companies are raising and my portfolio. Not my CRM. I use a very specific VC-based CRM for VCs, but I haven't gotten a Notion yet. I think part of it is, I'm such a cheap ass. Like, I have about 10 people on Team Ignite in various capacities, and if we went on Notion, it would cost me hundreds of dollars a month, right out of the gate. And I'm like, well, I get Google Docs for free, and is it infinitely more better than Google Docs? Because right now, Google Docs is just included with my Gmail.
Yep.
And so that's that bundling problem, right? And I'm sure Google's working on some Notion add-ons to Google Docs.
They probably have it somewhere.
They probably have it, yeah.
Google has so many products, and something is probably going to serve for that, But I feel like Notion, at least when I started using it, it was very easy to use.
Yeah. It's great. I mean, it's just very powerful and configurable, and everything can kind of link to everything else in like an object-oriented format and stuff. Yeah, it's cool. It's just not cool enough to pay a bunch of money for, I think. Especially when either Microsoft or Google will probably bundle. It'll be like Microsoft Teams, that bundling kind of Slack killer strategy. I'll be like, oh yeah, Microsoft has that now.
Yeah,
and maybe it doesn't. Yeah, and it just works, and it's free.
I saw a graph on that the other day.
What is that?
I saw a graph on that the other day. Like the Teams has like 75 million users, and Slack has I forget how many, but it's
been pretty flat. Yeah. It turns out it's hard to compete with Microsoft. You definitely want to sell
it's
to
always
Microsoft.
What the VCs say, right? What are you going to do if Microsoft does this or Google does this or whatever?
Yeah, that's funny. You mentioned that. I mean, it's definitely something as an investor, I'll look at something and be like, gosh, isn't this just like a feature on top of, Microsoft 365? Or on top of Word or interesting. Who's your biggest inspiration in the business world? That's probably Elon, right?
We'll go back to that guy.
I mean, I think I think the history books will be nice to him. I think when you kind of look back,
I certainly hope so.
He'll be bigger than Carnegie or Rockefeller or Henry Ford or any of the famous entrepreneurs. Definitely Steve Jobs. Just all the different ways he's touched all these industries and.
Yeah, no, he's building for the future, and the future is going to be what he decides it to be, basically, I think. And that's cool for him.
Yeah. Well, he just thinks in a first principle way, right? Like, why not batteries? Why not now? How would we do that? And just, he's great. What's your favorite way to unwind after a busy day?
I like to play sports. I'm very sporty, so I grew up obviously playing football or soccer. I think it's the right term here. So
football.
I haven't played a lot lately, but I have a lot of things that I used to do, like go for a run or lift weights or play tennis or golf or whatever. So I like that. I like going into like the active mode, and then just, if it's been a really long day, just, turn my mind off and watch Netflix is also something I do. So yeah, those are kind of the two things.
It's hard for me to unplug as well. I think we're kind of similar. Purposely put work down and at certain times of the day when I feel my energy kind of waning, and just go, do one of those other things and then come back to it. It's really hard too, but you got to unplug, otherwise you burn yourself out. What's one skill you think is essential for future entrepreneurs?
If I didn't say selling, I'd be lying. I think also having your own notion of the future, I think is very important. Like things that you believe to be true and are going to be true. And based on that, you can do a lot of things. And I think that's very valuable for a lot of people. And I don't think people look at it enough in terms of like, what do I think is going to happen in the future? And how do I work back to what is today, and kind of how that's going to shape how we get to that future that I think is going to happen, right? And so I think those two things are very important. And I dislike like when there's like very small improvements on things, and like that's your way of settling. So definitely like to think about the future and what's going to be, and kind of build back from there is a very important skill, I think.
That's great. So for anyone out there, especially freelancers that want to get a hold of you, what's the best way to get in touch?
Yeah, so they can email me. I'm always open 24/7. Christian at crema.cm. So we're still working on getting that .com domain. Needing some more funding for that.
And you're in touch with the person who owns it, and they probably want a bunch of money for it.
They probably do. We contacted them like 2 weeks ago to see if they would sell it to us. Still haven't heard back. So kind of in that process right now. But hopefully, just saw that kind of guy that bought friend.com for like 1.8 million.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, damn, that's a lot. I don't think I would spend that much money on it, but definitely see the value of having like a short 4 to 5 letter .com domain is definitely important.
When we bought ours, it was, Team Ignite. So we got teamignite.vc and then teamignite.ventures, which is our main. But teamigniteventures.com was taken. What?
Like,
nobody else has
there?
Who bought that?
Yeah, definitely. And it sucks. Like if it was another business that was called Crema and they had crema.com, okay, that's fine, that's good for you. But there's no one has that. Crema.com doesn't lead to anywhere, and so give it to me, man. I'll put good use it.
Right. Put it to good use. It's for a good cause.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Christian, for coming on the program. Really appreciate it.
No, thank you so much for having me, Brian. Always a pleasure talking to you.